waiver by negotiation, or by conduct. An owner wishing to enter into a transaction to sell, lease, or further encumber real estate which is presently encumbered by a mortgage needs to first negotiate a limitation or waiver of the existing mortgage holder's due-on rights. Think of it this way. Waiver agreements are trade-offs. In return for waiving or agreeing to limit the exercise of its due-on rights in the future, the mortgage holder may demand valuable consideration, such as additional points, like an origination, additional security, principal reduction, increased interest, a shorter due date, and an assumption fee. How does this play out in actual practice? Let's take a look. Consider a buyer who applies for a mortgage to purchase a residence they intend to occupy for only a few years. The buyer is concerned that due-on enforcement will later make it more difficult to resell their property since interest rates are likely to continue to rise. The buyer and lender negotiate the conditions on which a qualified buyer in a later sale of the property will be able to assume the buyer's mortgage without a call by the mortgage holder. In exchange, the buyer, since they will be occupying the property for a short duration, agreed to pay increased points or a higher interest rate subject to applicable Reg Z fee caps. Now, keep in mind the mortgage holder's waiver of their due-on rights under an assumption agreement applies only to the present transfer to the buyer and one future transfer to a comparable qualified buyer. Unless additionally agreed to, any other transfer of an interest in the property will trigger the due-on clause, allowing the mortgage holder to call or recast the mortgage again. In addition to a formal written waiver agreement, waiver of the mortgage holder's due-on rights may also occur by conduct, when the mortgage holder fails to promptly enforce its due-on rights. For example, consider a buyer who purchases real estate subject to a trust deed containing a due-on clause. The mortgage holder discovers the transfer and promptly calls the mortgage. But the mortgage holder then behaves strangely. They accept payments from the buyer for several months, a period longer than a reasonable time to enforce a call by foreclosure when the principal is not paid in full. After interest rates increase, the mortgage holder then starts a foreclosure to enforce their prior call by refusing further payments. Can the mortgage holder, after accepting payments from the borrower following their discovery of the transfer or any call for payment of a lump sum payoff, later attempt to call or foreclose? No. Here, the mortgage holder waived their right to enforce the due-on clause by their conduct. After discovery of the transfer or calling the loan, they accepted payments, which is inconsistent with enforcing the due-on clause. The mortgage holder may not later foreclose to enforce a call as they waived that right by continuing to accept payments long before or after the call.